to me, it's just like it's all part of the same rush to get a single narrative.
Yeah.
And like, gotta find out what the deal with this thing is. Gotta come to your opinion on it. Gotta have your story on it. Gotta come to that narrative. And then usually there's two, like one narrative on each side, right? And then they're in conflict, obviously designed to be that way because I mean you can sell more tickets with a fight than you can with like people agreeing. So there's this commercial interest in that. If you're talking about like CNN and Fox, there's really no upside for either of those places to be like, we really agreed with what they said the other night. That's like bad and dumb business wise. But there's this rush for like a single narrative. And you see it in just to take it back to entertainment too. You see it in entertainment all the time where it's like, let's make this as simple as possible.
Let's tie it up nice.
Yeah. And that's, the world doesn't really work that way, but our world is increasingly working that way.
Yeah.
And there's like a concept that I think about a lot is ambiguity in my, like when I'm making a work of art. Okay. Ambiguity just means something that has more than one meaning. People say like, well, what do you mean? What were you trying to say? It's like, well, not one thing for starters, not one thing. Saying one thing, there's a word for that. Like if I'm making a movie and I'm trying to tell you one thing, one idea, like about how the war works or something, we usually call that propaganda. Like if I'm trying to just convince you of something.
Yeah.
But ambiguity is like I'm trying to show you a couple of different things that can all coexist that in some ways might seem on the surface to be mutually exclusive, like a guy who's a killer but also has like an emotional life, or a woman who's like deeply dishonest but also has this like tremendous sense of integrity. It's possible for more than one thing to be true at the same time.
Yes.
But that is what's being lost in everything that you're talking about.
Yeah.
That sense of like multiple explanations, multiple factors. And that is, it's part of the politics, which is very black and white. It's part of all this online stuff that I don't know anything about that's also super black and white, right? It's what you're talking about with the virtue signaling. It's like good or bad. It's never like, hey, how can we step back and have a more nuanced view?
Yeah.
And how can we kind of find like a synthesis that includes all of it? And how can we come to this conversation from a place of love and a place of like humility? It's always just like, how can we fuck this guy and get the narrative? But that's all like a simplification thing. And I think that's why I said like culture and decay, because the simpler shit gets and the less like nuanced it gets, the harder it is to see like the bogeys behind the trees.
I think human beings have a natural inclination to try to tie things up nice so they make sense, so they don't have to think about it as much anymore. They could define it in their head. Now I know what it is. But in this world, there's such a massive influx of information. There's so much data to take in. There's so many opinions. There's so many perspectives. There's so many facts. It's so hard to find where the facts are coming from, whether they've been filtered or distorted. And I think people get real scared by that, and then they really try to adhere towards an ideological perspective. They really try to adhere towards whatever the rules of their tribe are.
Yeah, but you got to resist that.
Yes, you do.
Because when you do that, you're going to be missing out. Like, there's no ideology that can cover everything.
Right.
I mean, except for maybe like a scientific law. But like once you get past like the laws of gravity and some of the more basic stuff, like any ideology that seeks to explain how the world works is going to be missing all kinds of things on the edges of it.
Where I think this is going, I mean, this is all technologically driven, right? Yep. The access to this information, the ability to distribute this information, the way people are communicating, and the fact that there's so much data out there that you have to go through is all because of technology. It's all because of social media. It's all because of the internet. It's all because anyone at any point in time can put something on their phone or put them on a computer and put it out there in the world. And you're dealing with more data on a daily basis than the human race has accumulated over the entire course of written history every day. It's just constant mass amounts of data, and you don't know what's right and what's wrong. And you want to be a good person.
What's all the data you're talking about?
Just communication. Just whether it's Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. You're dealing with videos, you're dealing with text, you're dealing with people writing paragraphs and stories and blogs. Just the sheer raw amount of information that is being distributed and the communication that's going back and forth between human beings. It's unprecedented.
Right. Like in the old days, if you were, let's say if it was 1972 and you were 22 years old and you hadn't been drafted into Vietnam, and you wanted to know like what was going on in Vietnam.
Yeah.
You were curious, right? You would see it on the news, and you'd see like because back then the press corps had a lot more freedom, and they were actually allowed to go where they wanted to in the war. But if you were really looking for like your like the conceptual framework that would ground you and orient you, you probably wait until the December issue of Esquire magazine came out, and you'd read this like giant 15,000 word article by Michael Hare or something, and then you'd know, and all your friends would read that too, and then they would know. And that's what I'm talking about. That sort of like centralization of opinion is what has been like kind of blown into a million.
But even
it's not just
then,
like the quantity of information; it's the fact that there's no hierarchy of like, I mean, there is, you can still select what you want, but I don't know, that's very different from today, where if you were trying to figure out what was really going on in the Ukraine, for example, and unless you really knew which journals to dig into, it'd be kind of hard.